Simonics, and welcome back to a new quick win about one of the cool new components of Ionic version 6. Today we want to focus completely on the new revamped Ion Datetime component because it is pretty amazing and the documentation page is pretty long, so that's always a good combination for a nice tutorial. What we're going to do is we're going to first of all check out the basic usage. We're going to take a look at the different presentation modes for the modal and how we can basically integrate it really in the easiest possible way. We're going to then transition into parsing the date from the datetime component and which exact values can be passed into it and how we can present it afterwards to the user. And finally, we're going to build something very cool, and that is a modal with blurred, transparent background in which you can select the date, but also the modal is inline, so it's really an interesting combination and you should definitely stick around until that third option. If you got any questions, as always, code to the quick win below this video for all Ionic Academy members, and if you're not yet an Ionic Academy member, really check it out, ionicacademy.com, my place to help you and get better with Ionic. But now let's get into the cool datetime component. Alright, so to get started, we just need a blank new Ionic application using the latest Ionic versions. In my case, it was a release candidate, but in your case, if you're starting an application right now, I really hope that we are already arrived on Ionic 6. Otherwise, if you want to get a preview, you can just npm install add Ionic Angular add next. That would basically be the same to get the release versions. Anyway, what you need as well to correctly use the datetime component, or well, to handle the format, is the datefns package. That's a simple library here that's recommended by Ionic, was recommended in the past as well as a replacement for moment.js, which is a pretty big component, and this is a very lightweight component that you can use or actually should use instead. Now, if you install all of that, we can directly get started. What I did so far is I created a little array of the different available modes. You can of course find that in the documentation of the Ion Datetime. Just check it out, Ion Datetime. I'm right here on the beta docs. Can we just find modes? Mode? No, actually it's not mode, it's presentation, something like that. Please go to the properties. Come on, this page is really huge. So you can dive into all of this. We're not gonna use all the things like month, values, name, but we're gonna use a few essential things. So this is the presentation mode, and we definitely want to see all of them in action. And we're gonna do this by using our little array and then creating a super simple segment control at the top. So I'm going to put this in using our selected mode. I'm going to make this scrollable because there are quite a few modes, and just create a segment button for every mode of our modes array. As a result, we got this little scrollable segment right here, so we can switch between the different elements. Now let's finally get the Ion Datetime on screen. I'm going to wrap it in a card because, well, we can actually also do it without the card. Ion Datetime. We're gonna need perhaps a little model, but we're gonna keep that for later. We're gonna set the presentation mode to our selected mode, which should already be enough to get this preview. It works pretty great. As you can see, we got the selection between the month. How can I leave this? We got the days, we got some styling out of the box. I can also swipe through this. Not sure why it hangs now, because on a device it definitely works. But now let's see, this is the classic date. Then we got date time, which adds another row for the time at the bottom with a little popover selection. Then we get a selection for only month, which is basically just a picker. So you're gonna have to make sure that this is used carefully. I would actually rather display it at the bottom, not in a form, I guess. Then we got month year, which is just month and year combined, just like year, also same picker style. And then we got two more called time, which is just the clock time right here, and time date, which is usually messed up if I switch between the presentation modes. So I think time date is just the same like datetime, only that we got the time at the top and then the date. So just a tiny difference between the two. Now, let's try and actually use this in a useful way. To do this, we're gonna wrap the Ion datetime inside of an Ion item. We're gonna use an item with a click event to expand our picker view. So I'm gonna do it like this, because usually you have a form in which you wanna select a date or a time, and therefore I would usually hide that view. And in the end, we will also see the modal view, which is, I think, maybe my preferred presentation for the this. Then we add a little Ion label in here, date, and an Ion text slot end of the item. And here we're gonna use a formatted string, because the problem is that our date is first of all an ISO string. We can create the today value using something like this. We can now import format from date FNS. That's why we installed it, and that will use a classic JavaScript date and format it to something that is 9 o'clock. So you could also, I guess, leave this out, but having some kind of default value might make sense. But then we're gonna also have this formatted string, simply because you don't want to display the date value, right? So we could certainly display the date value inside the input after the user has selected something. But you don't really want to show that, do you? So therefore we're gonna have to add another function, which we will call, let's first do one for set today. So in set today, we will just call this right in the beginning. And here we're gonna set our formatted string to format, once again, using format from the library we installed. And I will actually copy this because it's a quite long string, which looks like this. Okay, so the output from the Ion datetime, I think it was already in the past an ISO string, and it's definitely one right now as well. So we have this format of the today date with our time added, and then we format it to this in the end. So our minutes, month, day, year. Then we just need to use, instead of the date value, the formatted string in here. And then it looks definitely a lot better to the end user. So internally, or for your backend, I would recommend you use the real date value that we have in here. But for displaying, really use something like this, which is a more formatted version of that string. Now let's also add our picker. No, actually the date time. But we're gonna make it conditional, and we only want to display it if we clicked on that row. So we kind of use a fake item selection. You might previously have used an Ion datetime for this, and then you click it and it opens. But we're gonna use it like this, a bit different. First of all, we're gonna set its value to our date value. We're gonna use, can we already display it like this? Maybe we could do this now side by side. I think that makes sense. Okay, and I'm gonna close the debugging tools because let's hope we don't need that. Okay, so when I click this, it opens this view. Let's change the datetime and also add a size. By default, it's using size fixed, which is this fixed size. If we use cover, it will use all the available space. And I think cover usually looks a bit better. Now, we don't really have any buttons to select the time. Although we can jump around and we could close it, it's not really changing our time. So to handle this, we're gonna use the Ion change event, and we're gonna call date changed. I feel like I have a typo, changed. You know this feeling when you look at a word and you just like, nah, that's not right, but I can't immediately see what's wrong. Yeah, that happens to me all the time. Okay, great that we disabled the lock. Now we still need the lock to take a look at this. So what happens if I change it? We see the lock. The problem is I couldn't really make this work with the classic ng model approach. There were two events firing from ion change and everything was kind of messed up. So a little trick to get the current value from the ion datetime is now adding a template reference like datetime to it. And within the ion change function, we're going to pass the value of the datetime. So I found this somewhere as well inside the documentation, and I think that's actually a pretty good way. So now we could see whenever we change something, we should get the latest value in our log statement here. Let's give it a try. And then we see a somewhat strange looking format. Well, that's the ISO string, but we at least get it. And we even get it twice. That's great. Really great. Now, that means whenever we change something, we need to update our string. So we can do this right inside our date changed function using basically the same like before, but this time only parsing the value that we pass to the function and then formatting it to our whatever format you pick. On top of that, we're gonna set the current date value to the value because we only have a one-way data binding in here. We don't have the ng model two-way data binding with a banana in the box. We only got that one-way binding. And as well, when the date has changed, I feel like we could close the picker, but at the same time, I'm not so completely sure. That's interesting because right now it immediately triggers the ion change function. Let's give it a try and do something, and that is add show default buttons true. And that will add two buttons automatically to the component cancel and done. And we see now it's not triggering the ion change event. That's actually interesting. I learned something again as well. So now only when I click done, the new time will be applied. That means we could use this .show picker equals false again in here because now it should really work like that. Let's give it a try. Done, and it changes. So let's change it to something like around Christmas time, and it works. Now let's also handle the cancel event because right now it's not working, but we can easily catch this with the ion cancel event. So in the case of cancel, I'm just going to show picker false, which would once again hide our initial datetime component without any changes. So I could select something, cancel it, it would be closed. I think that's already a pretty good usage. Also, if you don't like the background, which I definitely don't do, let's give it a try. Ion datetime, background white. Let's see. I always try to use standard CSS, and then if it's not working, I fall back to the CSS variables, but in most cases it usually works like this already. So that would be my first recommendation on how you could add this to a form where you want to grab a date. I would just display it conditionally inline, then you either can quickly select something, done, and it's added, and the rest of the form can be handled. Now, if you don't like that approach, I could understand that. There's another way, and we're gonna do that as well. For this, what we're gonna do is we're gonna use another ion item, and we're gonna put in just an icon, a label, and a formatted string at the end. And on click, we wanna open a modal. Now, what I did first of all was attaching a click event, triggering with the modal controller, showing the modal, and everything kind of worked. But there's actually a different way that I found, and I found this quite interesting. So I wanted to share this with you. You can actually have an inline modal right here. That's really interesting. And you can define a trigger, and now we just add the ID of the trigger to our ion item, and then let's see what happens. Actually, might wanna, no, we don't have to. And what happens is the modal actually opens up. That's pretty interesting. And inside the modal, we now need to define an ng template with our content. So we got the ion content in here, and then we're gonna put another datetime in here. Let's just copy this to get started. Ion datetime, yeah, still need to close the Ion datetime. And now, let's see, we don't see anything. That's great. Why do we not see anything? Ion modal, trigger, item, could be different reasons. That's always great. Come on, where's my content? Ion content, we definitely have the modal, we have a content. Perhaps the white color for the background, is that the problem now? No, you can't be serious. That's not the problem. The ngIf, of course. We don't need the ngIf right now. Please, keyboard, don't start this again, or you will directly go out of my window. Okay, we got the picker here. That's a good start. Don't mind that it looks horrible. We can still figure this out. But for now, we could click done and it would close. I don't know, would it select the date? It would actually even select it right now. I'm kind of confused that it works like this, because that's not what I expected. Okay, maybe we can skip one step. So we're gonna use just the same layout like we had before. And then we're gonna move to the global SCSS to add a bit of styling for the modal. So we could have a custom class, but I would just gonna make this globally. Then what I want to do is first of all set the background and set the content part of the modal to something that looks a bit transparent. Now the problem is our Ion content has still the wrong height. So I'm gonna go for Ion content with, let's say, a bit of transparent background. Then we should already see the effect of our blurred background. Yeah, because it's at the top, we can't see anything blurred below it. So let's find this and add padding top 20 view height. Now we can see that already makes a lot more sense. And to position it correctly, we can now add 4 more properties. Let's just add padding top. Padding should start and end to make it a bit centered, and the transparent background, we actually already got that. So with just a few CSS rules, we should now be able to show this nice overlay component. On top of that, we could even add something to the Ion content. We could add Ion datetime. Datetime border radius, let's say 8 pixels. I'm not sure if we should put it there. And then it looks really, really clean, I think. We can now select and it automatically works. I'm really, it's still a release candidate. So I've seen a few issues with the Ion datetime. But definitely that presentation is good. If you want to take one more step because you don't like the presentation, I would recommend that you create a custom modal enter transition. I'm not sure if this is possible to be defined in here. I feel like not sure if that will work. In that case, you might have to still open the modal from code and then define the enter and leave animation. So you could make this as an enter animation where it's just the background comes up, but the content comes in from the center or just fades in, so it's not coming up from the bottom. I'm actually not sure, maybe for the pixel it already looks like that, or how does the modal? Yeah, that looks certainly a lot better. I think that is how it looks. Maybe can we? I don't know if that will work. Yeah, of course for pixel it's working like that. But let's see if this also. Ha! Nice. But now also the datetime is using the material design, so it's not 100% perfect right now. But that's what I wanted. So that's definitely what I would recommend as an enter transition for the picker view. Now, although this seems to work, I really don't know why. I wanted to show you something as well. So if you're not happy about the buttons at the bottom, there is a slot called buttons. So you can remove the show default buttons. And then instead what we're gonna do is we're gonna bring in some buttons to the slot buttons. We're gonna call this one close and the other one select. And let's just implement a close and a select function. Now that means you would now have to handle the click on the buttons yourself. So dismiss and select. If you want to do this, you need to add the view child. So add the view child, Ion Datetime, Ion Datetime. And with that view child, you can now trigger different functions. So for example, in the close case, you can call this .datetime cancel. And I think there's also, emits the cancel event and optionally closes the popover or modal. I think we have to pass in true to make it really dismiss. Yeah, so let's pass in true. And then it should from code cancel our modal as well. So there we go, dismiss, and it's canceled. In the select case, there's another function from the datetime that you should call as far as I know, and that's called confirm. So although it works before, or it worked before in our case with the default buttons, this is what you should call. So confirms the selected datetime value, updates the value property, and optionally closes the popover. I guess this is basically what the default buttons are already doing. So I'm gonna set this once again to Christmas and hit select, and then it's selected. But this would be the way to handle your Ion Datetime or your custom buttons put into the slot. So this is really now within the tag of the Ion Datetime. There are more tags. Do I still have this somewhere open? Yeah, of course not. Why should I keep something that relevant open? There we go. If we check it out, there's a buttons slot, there's a time label and a title slot. We got a few, just 3 custom properties. And we got the functions. We used cancel, we used confirm. You could also use reset if you want to. We had the events, and then of course there's a ton of properties that you can additionally check out. We've used the most important one, which is the presentation mode. We connected the value. You can set also the locals, the minimum, maximum value, first start, different properties here as well. So just go check it out inside the datetime components. But I think this is already pretty good to a very decent datetime component. And I think it should actually look with enough of additional styling, even good on the web. So this is certainly not the best web presentation. I might have to work on that. But for mobile, I think our presentation, especially on Android, was pretty cool. For iOS, maybe give it a try and create a custom animation. I think I got a tutorial on handling custom modal enter animations as well, so just go check it out or use the component as it is, because it's definitely an improvement to Ionic 5. Alright, and that's it for today. I think the new Ion Datetime component looks really amazing. Yeah, we might have to work a bit on the presentation. If you want to display it in a modal, you could also display it in a popover. That's also shown in the documentation. You might have to add a bit of logic to make it appear inside a form where it just expands. But overall, this default style with the title, with the dates, it's scrollable, you got the buttons. Really, that makes for an amazing new component. If you got any other questions about this component or would like to see it in a different usage, just leave a comment below, and of course check out the Ionic Academy, which powers this quick win. I hope you all have a great week. I will certainly catch you next week, so happy coding, Simon.